The flight attendant shouted, "Get out of first class!" Shoving Marcus Reynolds as a passenger jeered, unaware that in 2 days, his lawsuit would bankrupt Horizon Airlines. Her voice cracked over the turbulence, but the venom was unmistakable. Marcus's body rocked against the seatbelt as the plane jolted. Row 2A, first class. Assigned seat, paid in full. Yet none of that seemed to matter. Before we reveal how Marcus turned the tables, tell us where you're watching from. If his fight for justice speaks to you, hit that subscribe button, share your thoughts in the comments below. The cabin lights flickered briefly, and Marcus's grip tightened on the armrest. A 60-year-old black man dressed in a tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, silver cufflinks catching the dim overhead light. He was calm, dignified, and used to turbulence, both literal and political. He had spent 3 decades weathering corporate storms, but this moment pierced deeper than most boardroom betrayals. Vicky Larson, the lead flight attendant, loomed over him, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed. "This seat's taken," she snapped, ignoring the boarding pass in his hand. "Move to economy." A ripple of uncertainty passed through the other first-class passengers, but none spoke, except one. Preston Tate, aggressive, red-faced, dressed like a Wall Street parody in a wine-colored blazer with gold buttons, leaned across the aisle, jabbing his finger. "You stole that seat," he barked. "That's mine." The cabin jerked again. Trays rattled. A woman screamed somewhere in coach. Through it all, Marcus remained seated, looking Preston directly in the eye. "Your actions will bury you," he said flatly. Vicky scoffed, reaching down to rip the boarding pass from his lap. "Economy's where you belong," she muttered under her breath, just loud enough to be heard. Ryan Kessler, a younger flight attendant with a crew cut and a smirk to match, appeared behind her, arms folded. "He's a security risk," Ryan announced, tapping into his crew app and typing "threat" in 2A. The notification pinged across crew devices. A few rows back, a passenger gasped. "Is he dangerous?" someone asked aloud. Ryan gave a knowing nod, fueling the fire. As if on cue, a man in 2D stood up, pointing. "He's making everyone nervous." Marcus raised his voice slightly, but never shouted, "You'll pay for this." Then Preston did something petty. "First class is for real executives," he said, loud enough for his TikTok live stream. Not him. His phone camera hovered over Marcus's face, capturing every crease of his composed expression. The caption read, "Horizon protects us." The live chat scrolled rapidly with a mix of laughter and disbelief. Ryan, seeing Marcus reach for his phone, chuckled and leaned over the control panel. "You're offline now," he said. With a few taps, he disabled Marcus's in-flight Wi-Fi. "Can't post lies if you can't connect." That was the moment Marcus turned to face the camera of Preston's phone. "This is being recorded," he said clearly. Ryan scoffed. Vicky rolled her eyes, and Preston grinned, thinking he'd won something. But this wasn't Marcus's first encounter with power dressed in cruelty. Years ago, a boardroom full of executives had tried to oust him, saying he was too old to understand digital strategy. Instead of stepping down, he founded Skypulse Solutions, an aviation data and cybersecurity firm that now serviced over 60% of the nation's commercial airlines. Horizon had declined his services 2 years prior. Their loss. Vicky's sneer was just another echo of the voices that once called him obsolete. What they didn't know was that Marcus had come prepared, not just with a boarding pass, but with allies. 3 rows back, Jada Holmes, a cybersecurity expert in dark frames and a leather jacket, watched everything unfold. Her phone was already filming. When Vicky shoved Marcus, Jada hit record again from a different angle. Next to her, Evan Ruiz, a veteran journalist with a YouTube following, tapped his screen and whispered, "We're live." A red icon blinked quietly in the corner of his screen. A few rows down in economy, Lila Patel, an influencer and activist, captured the audio with an external mic clipped to her tray table. Every word Vicky said was crisp, every insult preserved. And in seat 23B, Nia Foster, Marcus's longtime attorney, raised an eyebrow and pulled out her legal pad. Her fingers typed rapidly on her phone. "Ready when you are." Up front, just behind the cockpit, Colin Drake, today's pilot, adjusted his collar and discreetly turned on the body cam attached to the cockpit's jump seat. Years of quiet witnessing had taught him the value of receipts. And Marcus, he never panicked. With the push of a button on his left wristwatch, a sleek black band with a micro camera, he began recording. Preston's shove, Vicky's outburst, Ryan's lie about a threat in 2A. But what came next shook even the most indifferent passengers. "No blacks in our first class," Vicky muttered under her breath, assuming turbulence would cover it. It didn't. The microphone picked up every syllable. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply texted 2 words to Nia Leakett. Colin, still in the cockpit, uploaded the body cam footage to TikTok using the plane's encrypted pilot network. He added a hashtag Horizon Injustice. It hit 3 million views in 4 minutes. Passengers began pulling out their phones. Some had doubted Marcus minutes ago. Now they were filming Vicky. Others whispered nervously. Preston's TikTok was still live, but now the comments had turned. "Delete this." One user wrote, "You're a racist." Another chimed in. Lila reposted the footage on Instagram Reels with subtitles. Evan's YouTube feed ticked into the thousands. Jada added a voiceover. "This is a 60-year-old executive being profiled." Live. Chaos buzzed through the cabin, not just from the weather outside, but from the storm now brewing online. A man in 4B yelled, "Are we going to let this happen?" while another filmed Vicky's stone face as Marcus turned to her one last time. "Your career's over," he said. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. The cabin, once divided, was now alive with recording devices, whispers, and flashing notifications. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably. Others turned away, ashamed. The plane tilted slightly, correcting course as the turbulence eased. But the damage was done. Dozens of videos, thousands of shares. In a digital age, truth moved faster than planes. And Marcus Reynolds had just begun his descent into something bigger than vindication. This turbulent standoff was set to ignite a legal storm. The seatbelt sign still blinked overhead, but order had long disintegrated. The plane, mid-climb above Pennsylvania skies, now felt like a pressurized courtroom with no judge and far too many prosecutors. Vicky Larson gripped the PA handset with shaking fingers, her voice cracking over the speakers. "This is a security emergency. We have a possible terrorist threat in first class." Gasps erupted across the cabin. Even in economy, heads turned. One woman clutched her chest. Another pulled her child close. In the front row, Ryan Kessler slammed his thumb against his phone screen. Uploading a new video to TikTok, Marcus Reynolds is armed, Horizon staff on high alert. The lie surged like wildfire through the feed. Preston Tate, still riding high from his earlier shove, stood up in the aisle with his phone camera pointed at Marcus. "We're under attack," he shouted. "Horizon's in danger." His voice cracked theatrically as he pivoted the phone to capture the cabin's fear, fully aware of the optics he was spinning. Nearby, Jada Holmes snapped her head around and stared daggers at Ryan. "Show me the weapon," she demanded. Her voice cut through the rising panic like a scalpel. Ryan didn't even blink. "Sit down, ma'am," he snapped. "This doesn't concern you." But it did. Every word, every frame, every lie. A few seats back, passengers began chanting, "Arrest him! Arrest him!" Not even knowing what Marcus was accused of. He remained upright, composed, voice cool as ice. Your slander is criminal, and every second of this is being documented." The turbulence hadn't let up. Trays rattled, overhead bins clapped slightly open and closed, but it was the turbulence of hysteria that now destabilized the flight. Without warning, Ryan and Elaine Carver, Horizon's senior cabin director, who'd remained in the shadows until now, grabbed Marcus by the arms and pulled him toward the galley. "You're not leaving until we land," Ryan sneered, dragging him past startled passengers. The door slammed behind them. Marcus now stood in the narrow metal galley, surrounded by storage compartments, coffee pots, and silent hostility. "He's a liability," Elaine whispered to Vicky, her lips barely moving. "He's going to sue." Vicky leaned in, her voice even lower. "We leak his travel history. Let the media say he's unstable." From behind the door, Marcus spoke calmly through the crack. "You're all exposed. Every word, every move." But they weren't listening. They weren't worried yet. Preston took the moment to reignite the fire. He spun in the aisle, waving his phone. "I don't know who this man is, but Horizon belongs to us," he shouted, live streaming again on Instagram. The comment count surged. Ryan returned to the galley and twisted a latch on the door, clicking it shut. "Stay caged," he muttered. Marcus turned toward the small window, watching a lightning flash illuminate the clouds. "This is being archived to 3 servers," he said aloud, not caring who heard. It wasn't a bluff. Back in the cockpit, Colin Drake sat frozen. His fingers hovered above the intercom. Through his headset, he heard Elaine's voice faintly through the wall. "Older black men threaten the brand." That line echoed like thunder in his chest. He tapped record on his secondary device, audio only, and forwarded the clip to Lila Patel. At that moment, Colin stopped being an employee and started being a witness. In row 26A. Lila received the file and, without hesitation, posted it with captions, "Cabin Director confirms racial motive. #Horizon Injustice." Within 5 minutes, the video trended at #2 on Twitter. People weren't just watching now, they were responding. Meanwhile, Evan Ruiz's YouTube live feed had crossed 12,000 viewers. "This is Marcus Reynolds," he said into the camera, founder of Sky Pulse, the man being treated like a criminal. The live chat was ablaze. "Is this legal? They locked him up. Who's running this airline?" Ryan's face popped up on several screens, captured mid-smirk by Evan's discreet camera. It was the kind of smirk that sank careers, the kind that PR firms couldn't fix. Marcus, inside the galley, stared at the ceiling. It smelled faintly of burnt plastic and bleach. The air was thinner here, but he'd been in thinner air before, when investors had walked out of his first pitch, when Fortune 500 boards tried to sideline him for cultural fit. He hadn't blinked then. He wouldn't now. Ryan's false TikTok alert, however, had done more than smear Marcus's name. It had rallied a digital rebellion. Jada, seething, leaned toward the control panel near the forward bulkhead. As a cybersecurity specialist, she knew Horizon's tech stack, and she knew its flaws. She toggled an override, muttering under her breath, then synced her phone to the PA system. In a burst of static, Marcus's boarding pass appeared on screen through her Instagram live name, Seat 2A, paid in full. The proof blared across the cabin's internal monitors and personal seatback screens. Passengers froze. Phones came out again. Screenshots were taken. Vicky's mouth fell open. "That's hacked," Ryan shouted, lunging toward her. But it was too late. The view count, 9 million in 7 minutes. Hashtags flared like wildfire. #Horizon Injustice. #Justice for Marcus. #boarding while black. In row 15, Evan stood and blocked the aisle, raising his hand. Until he's released, no one moves. The chant caught on. Justice for Marcus. Let him out. Some clapped. Some cried. Some looked away, ashamed. Ryan barked at crew to confiscate phones, but no one moved. Elaine whispered frantically into her headset. "We need to shut this down." But power had shifted. It no longer sat with uniforms and name tags. It sat in the cloud, in live feeds, in viral audio and hashtags that outran policy, in the cockpit. Colin stared at the instrument panel, heart thumping. "They're going to burn for this," he muttered, flipping a switch to maintain manual override. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of the airline. He was afraid of doing nothing. Elaine, now visibly panicking, barked into her comm, "Destroy the phones," all of them, but the damage was done. Comments flooded in. "I fly Horizon every month, never again. This is racism, plain and simple. We stand with Marcus." At that moment, somewhere in the galley, Marcus smiled faintly to himself. They had tried to cage him with lies, but truth had wings, and it had already taken off. This cabin riot was set to crash Horizon's empire. The Airbus jolted again as the seatbelt sign blinked futilely, but restraint had long vanished from the cabin. Horizon Flight 227 had become a flying courtroom, a mob scene, and a broadcast studio, all in one. As the plane began to divert toward a smaller emergency airstrip, the tension cracked open like a pressure valve. Airport security personnel, 2 men in tactical vests, boarded during the slow descent, their presence announced by a hush falling across the cabin. But before they could reach row 2A, Elaine Carver beat them to it. Pointing a manicured finger, her voice sharp as broken glass, she barked, "That's him. That's the threat." Marcus Reynolds didn't move. He sat upright, gaze unblinking, breathing even. Preston Tate, seeing a final opportunity to steal the moment, surged from his seat and drove a sharp elbow into Marcus's arm. "Terrorist scum," he muttered, loud enough for the security team to hear. One guard stepped forward. Ryan Kessler, right behind him, tapped his tablet screen gleefully. "He's been deleted from the system," he said, turning the screen to Elaine. The app showed a blank square where Marcus's profile once sat. "You're erased," Ryan said with a sneer. A few first-class passengers clapped softly, unsure whether they were cheering safety or spectacle. A CBS camera crew, assigned to a nearby special interest story, happened to be on board and turned their lenses toward Marcus. The red recording light glowed. "Marcus Reynolds," the reporter murmured into her mic. "A high-profile black CEO is now being restrained aboard Horizon Airlines." Her eyes betrayed her doubt. Her tone did not, as Marcus rubbed his shoulder where Preston's blow had landed. He didn't wince. He simply turned to the security officer and said calmly, "If you put cuffs on me, make sure you're ready for court testimony." But they clicked the metal around his wrists anyway. The cold sting of it wasn't new. The indignity was familiar, if only because it had so often been masked in boardrooms rather than cabins. Vicky Larson, watching from behind the beverage cart, grinned and lifted a coffee cup as if to toast his downfall. "You're nothing," she said, sweeping her arm across Marcus's tray table and shattering his laptop on the floor. Sparks briefly flicked from the damaged hinge. "Horizon is safe again," Preston shouted into his TikTok livestream, still gripping his phone with shaking hands. Ryan Kessler leaned toward his crew chat. "Threat neutralized." He typed. A passenger down the aisle screamed, "Lock him up." Others murmured their agreement. The energy was raw, tribal. Marcus, now fully restrained, turned to the CBS camera and said only, "This is preserved." In a quiet moment during the descent, with the plane gliding just above cloud level, Marcus glanced at Nia Foster in the back of the cabin. With a subtle nod, he slipped a small flash drive from beneath his blazer cuff and palmed it to her as she passed by under the guise of heading to the lavatory. "Get this to Evan," he whispered. "This ends today." But Ryan, alert now to any movement from Marcus, shoved Nia back, grabbing the drive mid-hand off. Not so fast. He grinned. He crushed it under his heel in the galley. Oops. A few passengers gasped. That was evidence someone yelled. But Colin Drake, still in the cockpit, had seen it all through the rearview mirror and radioed Evan with a coded phrase, "Backup exists." Colin reached into the secure cockpit locker, retrieved an identical drive Marcus had given him earlier, and stuffed it into an emergency envelope marked medical. As the plane finally touched down on a remote tarmac, the wheels screeching beneath them, Evan Ruiz, broadcasting live, opened the envelope in full view of his stream. He plugged the drive into his laptop. The contents were staggering. Within minutes, Evan's feed showed Horizon Airlines' internal training manual, an unreleased bias document from a contractor Horizon had quietly hired. On page after page, phrases jumped off the screen passengers flagged as high risk include, followed by a list that included black males over 50 traveling alone, passengers using formal speech, and individuals recording interactions. The guidance advised crew to escalate these cases discreetly but assertively to avoid liability. The manual showed sample screenshots with fabricated examples, including a mocked-up profile labeled Marcus R. The final bullet point in the PDF read, "Prevent social media escalation at all costs." Evan uploaded the entire document to YouTube Live, tagging it #HorizonExposed. Within 12 minutes, the stream passed 60 million views. Screens in airports lit up with news alerts. Bias training leak Horizon Airlines manual sparks outrage. Jada Holmes intercepted the stream mid-broadcast and patched it into the cabin's entertainment system. The screen in every seatback flickered from a Horizon logo to a frozen page from the document Behavioral Risk Blackmail in Executive Attire. The passengers, previously confused or enraged by Marcus's presence, now watched in silence as the evidence turned the entire flight upside down. A woman in 1C turned to Vicky and whispered, "You lied." Another man removed his hat in shame. Evan's voice carried from a passenger's phone. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're seeing is not just discrimination, it is corporate policy." The final nail came when CBS interrupted its live broadcast to say the Department of Transportation had opened an investigation. The news scroll beneath the anchor's face read, "Breaking dot to probe Horizon Airlines for discriminatory practices after viral manual leak." Marcus, still cuffed, looked up at the screen. His phone buzzed. Nia had slipped it into his pocket. A text lit up from her, "We've got them. Dot investigating. Lawsuit begins in hours." Marcus typed back one line, "Bankrupt them." By the time the plane taxied to the emergency gate, Marcus had become a national headline. Preston's TikTok account was banned. Ryan's face was plastered across news segments. Vicky tried to shield her name tag, but screenshots had already circulated. Elaine shrieked into her headset, demanding to speak to corporate. But Roger Hensley, Horizon's CEO, was already watching the video go viral from his New York office. Face pale, fingers trembling, stock prices began to freefall. In less than 15 minutes, Horizon's market cap lost $3 billion, their Twitter account was locked, their app was hacked, and Marcus, still cuffed, but unbowed, smiled softly as the cabin door finally opened. Because what began as humiliation was now transformation. As the cabin raged, Horizon faced Marcus's justice. Roger Hensley's office on the 49th floor of Horizon Tower, Manhattan, buzzed with alerts, none of them good. The senior PR director stood frozen in the corner, her phone vibrating violently as Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, Threads, LinkedIn, and Facebook exploded with hashtags, #HorizonExposed, #BiasInTheSkies, #Reynolds vs Horizon. On the central monitor, Evan Ruiz's YouTube stream continued to loop the leaked training manual. Roger's jaw clenched tighter with every page. Passengers flagged as high risk. Avoid litigation by preemptive escalation. Target profiles black male. Over 50 formal attire. His voice, barely audible, broke the silence. Who is Marcus Reynolds? No one answered. Behind him, another screen showed Horizon's stock plummeting 62%, a financial hemorrhage with no tourniquet in sight. "Shut it down!" he barked. "Shut down every video, every post, everything!" But the room had already slipped into freefall. Legal counsel paced by the window. "We're being named in a federal civil rights investigation. In the corner," someone muttered. "He's already filed." Then louder. "He filed it before the plane landed." Roger spun around. Filed what? The head of legal, pale, held up her phone. A lawsuit, defamation, systemic discrimination, and he's naming you personally. Roger's face went blank. The kind of blank that comes when a man realizes he's underestimated the wrong opponent. "What's his background?" he asked. Elaine Carver's face flickered onto the monitor. "Did we vet him?" the PR assistant whispered. "We erased his profile." A pause. "We didn't know he was the founder of Skypulse." Inside the diverted jet, now grounded on a regional airfield in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Nia Foster paced beside Marcus as flight staff were detained for questioning. The cuffs had come off. The cameras had not. A perimeter of reporters formed outside the aircraft as FAA agents swarmed the tarmac. Colin Drake, already cooperating with investigators, handed over the original flash drive and provided a sworn statement about everything he'd overheard, from Elaine's racist whisper to Ryan's deliberate system tampering. In the makeshift holding room just off the jet bridge, Marcus opened LinkedIn and posted to the passengers who watched in silence. "I forgive you. To the crew who escalated a lie, I'm waiting in court." The post surged past 2,000 shares in under 20 minutes. Nia nudged her phone toward him. "We just filed in Southern District. Trial date is being rushed due to DOT involvement. They want a statement." Marcus didn't blink. "They'll get one." Across the aisle, a journalist asked if he had any comment for CBS. He looked up. "Yes. Tell the public Horizon's days are numbered." Back in the New York boardroom, Roger turned to his executive team. "We need to spin this," he said. "Make him look unstable. He threatened staff. We claim he hacked the feed. Say he falsified documents. Elaine, via remote conference, nodded in agreement. He orchestrated this," she said coldly. "We say it was a trap," but Ryan's face had lost its color. He looked up from his phone, panic in his voice. "They're already ahead of us. Jada Holmes just released a side-by-side of the official Horizon manual and the leak. It's real." Verbatim, Preston, watching from a private legal office, was no better off. His own TikTok account had been subpoenaed. His face, mid-punch, now starred in dozens of viral videos titled, "This is who Horizon protects." Meanwhile, a notice from Meta confirmed his business account had been permanently suspended. The damage was irreversible. "We're hemorrhaging public trust," the head of corporate affairs muttered. Roger stared at the table, then finally said the words he never thought he'd say. "Offer him a settlement." But just as the legal team began drafting terms, Nia delivered a sealed manila envelope to Horizon's legal counsel in real time. It was titled Reynolds v. Horizon Airlines et al. The cover sheet was stamped with federal approval. Outside the jet, Lila Patel stepped forward, iPad in hand, and uploaded the filing document to LinkedIn and Threads. Caption Day 1 of Justice, let's go. The filing included attached videos from Jada, Colin's testimony, Ryan's own crew app posts, and Preston's live stream. The comment section blew up. Civil rights lawyers called it a landmark. Pilots across the nation began posting in solidarity. Some even pledged not to fly Horizon aircraft until justice was served. Meanwhile, CBS ran a primetime segment titled First Class Injustice, Who is Marcus Reynolds? They traced his background from his days at Harvard Law, to his years at the Department of Justice, where he prosecuted 2 major airlines for discriminatory profiling. The twist dropped like a bombshell. Marcus Reynolds wasn't just a CEO. He was the very man Horizon had feared becoming a regulator. They'd profiled the former prosecutor who wrote half the federal guidelines they violated. At Horizon HQ, Roger dropped the settlement letter he was holding. "We're finished," he whispered. "He designed the rules we broke." Phones rang in chaos. Flight attendants began calling in sick. Crew unions demanded immediate review of racial bias training policies. Meanwhile, Marcus posted once more to LinkedIn Day, "2 begins in court. We don't want revenge. We want reform." This lawsuit, filed mid-flight and under duress, wasn't just a personal battle. It was the start of a public reckoning. The courtroom would cement Marcus's power. The headlines moved faster than the planes ever could. Horizon bankrupted by bias lawsuit. Marcus Reynolds launches Airfare, a new era in aviation equity. In the days following the courtroom reckoning, Marcus didn't rest. He moved swiftly, not for revenge, but for reform. Using part of the settlement funds, he established Airfare, a nonprofit watchdog that partnered with the Department of Transportation to audit airlines for bias, racial profiling, and passenger mistreatment. Within 48 hours, 3 other airlines requested consultations to avoid a similar fate. Marcus, now a reluctant public figure, stood before press cameras and said, "This isn't about punishing one airline. It's about building a system where no one, black, brown, poor, elderly, disabled, is ever told they don't belong at 3,000 feet." His first reform, a passenger rights bill, adopted voluntarily by 4 major carriers, requiring real-time documentation of crew decisions, anti-bias certification for flight staff, and accessible reporting tools for in-flight discrimination. The second reform, mandating transparency in upgrade and seating decisions, preventing arbitrary demotions like the one he faced. Airfare's website, launched with the help of Jada Holmes, Lila Patel, and Colin Drake, offered open dashboards tracking each airline's progress. By week's end, millions had visited the site. The reform wave had begun, but not everyone embraced the new order. Former Horizon staff went silent, some retired, others fired, and a few disgraced. Yet passengers across America, especially those aged 45 and older who had witnessed discrimination in quieter decades, voiced their support in thousands of letters, online comments, and phone calls. "I saw what they did to Marcus." One woman from Chicago wrote, "It reminded me of 1961. Lila read it aloud during an Airfare live stream. Tears welled up as more messages poured in. 'You gave us back our dignity,' one man said. 'You made flying safe again.'" Ryan Kessler, once arrogant and untouchable, had become a national cautionary tale. Preston Tate's company collapsed after his role in the assault went viral. Elaine Carver quietly sold her estate and disappeared from public view. Vicki Larson applied for re-employment with 2 airlines. Both declined. Their silence became part of the justice. And then, just when the industry was adjusting to the shift, the massive twist hit. A leaked report from within Horizon's defunct data systems revealed something even more insidious than racial bias. Hidden beneath layers of system code was a passenger surveillance program that had operated without passenger knowledge for 3 years. The program used seat sensors, biometric scans, and behavioral tagging to secretly classify passengers into risk categories based on race, age, and body language without consent. Evan Ruiz, working with a whistleblower from Horizon's IT team, released the internal documents publicly. The backlash was immediate and catastrophic. Marcus called an emergency summit with federal lawmakers and the FAA. "This isn't just racial profiling," he said, holding up the report. "This is illegal surveillance on American citizens inside U.S. airspace." The New York Times picked up the story. So did CNN, ProPublica, and NPR. The phrase sky scanning trended across every platform. Airline stocks dropped overnight. Within 72 hours, Congress convened an emergency session. A bipartisan aviation privacy bill, the Reynolds Amendment, was introduced, banning unauthorized biometric tracking on domestic flights. It passed with overwhelming support. For the first time in U.S. history, airlines were federally required to disclose all surveillance technologies to passengers and undergo annual audits. This law exists because one man refused to be erased, said Senator Angela Carr during her floor speech. In the following weeks, Marcus was invited to testify before Congress, honored by civil rights organizations, and asked to serve as senior advisor to the DOT's Aviation Ethics Task Force. He declined the title, but offered his full cooperation. "The sky," he said in his closing statement, "should be the one place where all of us move forward, not backward." From the ashes of Horizon, something lasting had taken flight. For Marcus Reynolds, justice wasn't a moment. It was a movement. The fall of Horizon wasn't just a story about one flight gone wrong. It became a national reckoning that rewrote the culture of an industry. But for the people at the center of the collapse, the consequences unfolded more slowly, more painfully. Elaine Carver was stripped of her pension and barred from ever holding an FAA-certified role again. Once poised for a senior VP role, she now lived in obscurity, her name synonymous with willful silence. Ryan Kessler, who once gloated while deleting Marcus from the system, found himself erased instead, unable to find work in aviation. He took a job stocking shelves at a chain store, ducking from customers who recognized his face from news specials titled "Crew of Bias, Where Are They Now?" Preston Tate's consulting firm lost every client within 48 hours of his TikTok assault going viral. Lawsuits followed. Shareholders fled. He sold his penthouse at a loss and quietly declared bankruptcy. And Vicky Larson, who'd once strutted through first-class wielding authority like a weapon, now worked as a night receptionist at a low-end motel near LAX, greeted mostly by late check-ins and silence. On the wall behind her hung a small TV, occasionally playing the very footage that had undone her career. For each of them, the hashtag Horizon Exposed had become not just a trend, but a tombstone etched in digital stone. Their fall was steep, but it wasn't without meaning. Marcus Reynolds didn't celebrate their downfall. He had seen too much, lived through too many battles to gloat. Instead, he built something bigger. Out of the fire, he founded SkyPath, a national training and rehabilitation program for former airline employees who had lost their way in a system designed to fail. "We don't need perfect people," he said during the first live stream from the SkyPath Center. "We need people willing to change." Surprisingly, Ryan enrolled first, humbled, quiet, and no longer looking for shortcuts. He began as a volunteer. Over time, he spoke publicly about the rot within Horizon's ranks and how easily power fed prejudice. Lila Patel led digital outreach, teaching transparency in customer relations. Jada Holmes directed cyber ethics training. Colin Drake taught new pilots how to spot injustice from the cockpit. Nia Foster became general counsel. The organization quickly grew into more than reform. It became a movement. It attracted national press, funding from tech companies, and even endorsements from former airline CEOs who admitted, "We were asleep at the wheel." Airfare and SkyPath, working in tandem, rewrote policy, rewired culture, and reopened the skies to fairness. Within a year, Marcus's reforms became the gold standard for aviation worldwide. Airline brochures now listed not just amenities, but equity scores. Gate agents wore body cams. Flight crews were retrained in empathy, not just security. For the first time, Black, brown, indigenous, and immigrant passengers began reporting a decline in in-flight profiling. And for passengers aged 50 and up, many of whom had lived through decades of silent discrimination, Marcus's story became a symbol of late justice finally served. But as Marcus stood in his office overlooking the tarmac of a newly rebranded terminal, once Horizon's flagship, now converted into the Reynolds Aviation Equity Center, his phone buzzed with one last surprise. A rival airline, Vista Air, had quietly acquired Horizon's remaining assets during bankruptcy. But what no one expected was that their board would appoint Marcus Reynolds as non-executive chairman. His first act, turning the former Horizon headquarters into a transparency and compliance institute. On Threads, his announcement post garnered 3 million likes within hours. The caption read, "Justice isn't the end. It's the invitation to begin again." Reporters flooded the comments, but Marcus didn't grant interviews that day. Instead, he walked through the empty executive suite, now repurposed into an ethics training floor, and looked out over the runways, watching planes come and go. And now, as we bring his story in for a landing, we ask you this: where have you faced injustice? In travel, at work, in silence? What did you do? What will you do next? Because Marcus Reynolds turned a public humiliation into policy. He turned slander into structure. And in doing so, he reminded us that real change doesn't begin in courtrooms or headlines. It begins when someone says, "Enough," and means it. So tell us, have you ever been told you don't belong? Share your story in the comments below. Subscribe to this channel if you believe in justice, in truth, and in second chances, because tomorrow's tale of courage is already being written. And like Marcus Reynolds, it may take flight when no one's watching.